going to talk about when is the best time to eat protein and how does it affect your muscle growth, muscle hypertrophy, and what time of the day should you eat your protein, because that's a very common question people ask when they try to build muscle, especially when they're doing like intermittent fasting and things like that as well. Make sure you click a like and subscribe for future videos about optimizing your health and performance. Do it! Alright, so a lot of people sent me this video by Dr. Andrew Huberman, who was breaking down this one study about how the timing of the protein consumption affects muscle growth in both mice and humans. And I'm not going to play the video, but I will cover the study that he was referencing to, and it came out actually quite recently in July this year. And they basically took these two groups of mice. One of the group was like this early time-restricted eating, or not even, they didn't do any time-restricted eating, they just ate 3 meals. And the first half of the day, one group ate a large proportion of the protein, and the other one ate most of the protein at dinner, so to say. So it kind of tapered off as the day continued, whereas the other one ate the most of the protein in the earlier parts of the day. And they saw that the group that ate more protein, the higher protein in the early part of the day, basically saw a greater muscle hypertrophy response to training. So they were doing also resistance training with the mice, and the mice that ate early in the day for protein saw greater gains in muscle growth and muscle hypertrophy. Whereas the mice who didn't, or they ate later in the day with the protein, they saw less muscle growth. Pathetic. In the study, they also looked at humans. So they took these older Japanese and Korean women, and one of the group was eating a high protein breakfast and a smaller protein dinner, whereas the other one was eating more protein at dinner time. And this observational study saw that the breakfast group with the high protein at breakfast saw greater muscle volume and higher grip strength. So they didn't eat like a super high protein diet, but the amount of protein in themselves was pretty equal. And the breakfast group kind of outperformed the dinner group when it came to protein and muscle growth.
Wait a minute.
So I looked at the study itself as well, and there are like a few points that I want to bring out. And one of the main ones being is that, the total protein intake was pretty much the same, so to say. The total protein content of the both diets, both the breakfast and the dinner protein group was similar, and it was around like 1.2, 1.5 grams per kilogram per day. But the amount of protein per individual meals themselves wasn't equal at all. So you can see the blue column is the breakfast protein group, and the red column is the dinner protein group. So the breakfast group ate 30 grams of protein at breakfast, whereas the dinner protein group ate maybe it's like 16 grams of protein, something like that. So like almost half as little as the amount of protein as the breakfast group. The lunch was pretty much similar. The breakfast group ate about maybe 25 grams of protein, and the dinner group ate 28 grams, something like that. The breakfast group at dinner ate 24 grams of protein something, and the dinner group ate maybe 31, 32 grams of protein. So the total amount of protein is the same, but the distribution is skewed. Even it's not like even if you invert it, it's not the same, so to say, because the dinner group ate quite a lot less protein at breakfast than the breakfast group at dinner. So this already creates it's going to have an effect on the muscle hypertrophy and response, because there is a certain amount of protein your body needs to stimulate muscle hypertrophy per meal, and that threshold is somewhere around 1.6 grams to like 2.5, 3 grams of leucine, somewhere like that. And you get that amount of leucine usually from like 20 to 30 grams of protein. If you're like older person, then you need to have more protein per meal to stimulate muscle hypertrophy and stimulate this muscle protein synthesis response, because your body is more anabolic resistant, and it's not that sensitive to the signal. Whereas if you're young, you could potentially get away with eating, like 17 grams of protein per meal and still stimulate muscle protein synthesis. Whereas if you're older, like in this study, these were older women, then for them, 17 grams of protein per meal is not going to be enough probably to stimulate muscle protein synthesis, at least in adequate amounts. Whereas if eating 30 grams or 24 grams, 25 grams would provide a sufficient amount of stimulus. So this is probably, at least from the first look, like being a devil's advocate and trying to criticize it a little bit, to be skeptic that it's like the reason the dinner group saw less muscle growth was because they ate less protein per meal, from the breakfast group at least, whereas the breakfast group who ate dinner, then their dinner was substantially higher in protein than the breakfast group. Now that difference is probably like huge. There is definitely the circadian rhythm aspect to it as well. But yeah, I'm just trying to point out that you do need to hit a certain amount of protein to maximize the muscle protein synthesis response. And if you are not meeting that, then you're missing out on the gains. And if you're like an elderly person, like these women were, then you're going to lose more muscle as a result of that, or like you're not going to build that much muscle, if that makes sense.
Disappointed!
I agree with the circadian side for sure, like that, yeah, your body is more insulin sensitive in the morning, your body is, like the study says, your body is more sensitive to protein synthesis as well in the morning. Do you need to be, let's say people who are doing intermittent fasting, do you need to be eating your protein at breakfast and not eat dinner? Well, I think that in a real world, it's not going to probably matter that much as long as you're eating sufficient amounts of protein and as long as you are eating like a higher protein intake as well. So these women were under-eating protein, like it's not considered under-eating for the like recommendations or the average recommendations, but if you're trying to build muscle in the first place, like a fitness person, you're into bodybuilding or something, then eating only this 1.2 grams per kilogram is not going to be enough. You would need to be hitting 1.6 to 2.0 grams per kilogram to fully optimize the muscle protein synthesis response to training. So yeah, if you're eating a higher protein intake, then I don't think that it would matter if you don't eat breakfast that has protein, because you would have like this sufficient amount of anabolic amino acids in your system from the previous night already circulating in your system. So yeah, if you're overeating protein, quote unquote, if you're eating a substantially higher amounts of protein than the RDA, then it doesn't matter. But if you're in a calorie restriction, you're eating a very little amounts of protein, you're on a low protein diet, then maybe, yeah, like eating a higher amount of protein at breakfast would make sense. But if you're like a bodybuilder diet, eating a sufficient more protein, then it's not going to matter that much, I think, at least.
Awesome, I love protein.
So in conclusion, yes, your body is more insulin sensitive and your muscles are also more sensitive to hypertrophy and muscle protein synthesis in the morning. But does it mean that you have to have all your protein at the first half of the day? Not really, because there is a threshold as well, how much protein your body can stimulate muscle protein synthesis with. And if you're eating more protein than that, then it's not going to build additional muscle. So if you want to maximize your muscle growth, then you still need to spread your protein meals across the entire day and make them all higher protein, so to say. You shouldn't make them low protein if you're trying to build muscle. And yeah, generally it would make sense to have like at least a higher protein breakfast instead of a low protein breakfast. But if you skip breakfast and eat more protein later in the day, then at the end of the day, as long as you're eating a surplus of protein, so to say, like a higher intake of protein, then it's probably not going to be that significant. It only would matter if you're like in this cachexia, sarcopenia, frailty, you're losing muscle mass, you're in a severe calorie deficit, like in starvation mode, then yeah, it would be better to have the protein in the first half of the day. But if you're already in abundance of protein, then at least in my opinion, in my own experience, other people as well, is not that big of a difference.